Okay, let's unpack this. Think about how often you use the word thinking. You're thinking about dinner, thinking ahead to vacation, or just thinking about whatever pops into your head. It's a word we use constantly, right?
Yeah.
But have you ever stopped to really think about what thinking is?
It's one of those things we just do. Like walking. The actual process is often pretty much invisible to us, even though, it's fundamental to who we are.
Absolutely. And that's why we're diving into a really foundational text today, one that tries to dissect that very act. We're exploring insights from John Dewey's classic, How We Think.
Yeah, the material you shared, it's a translation, Kashtani, by Vul Anna. It's a fairly substantial book, 372 pages, published back in 2017, part of a series. And it's available as an ebook, looks like StatFree.com, VCTV Group was involved, but the original book is from way back 1910, and yet Dewey's analysis is still incredibly relevant.
It really is, isn't it? It's not just like abstract philosophy. There's psychology in there, insights for education.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is basically to pull out Dewey's core ideas. What does clear, effective thinking actually look like? Why does it matter so much? And maybe the most interesting part, what are the ways our own minds can lead us astray? We'll explore different sides of thought, and hopefully, understanding this better can help you sharpen your own mental game. Okay, so first up, Dewey points out that the word thinking, well, it's used in a really broad, kind of fuzzy way.
That's right. It covers almost anything that passes through our minds. Just being aware of something, even if it's not right there. We call that thinking of it.
Yeah, like that story about the old politician, the New England guy, asked if he was capable, and he said something like, "I hope you understand I'm almost always thinking from one thing to another."
Exactly. That captures that broadest sense perfectly. Just a passive stream, One idea just bumps into the next, no real direction, the mind just flowing.
But Dewey says the term gets narrower. It can also mean, like, believing something for a reason, even if the reason isn't great, or you haven't really checked it.
Right, there's at least some kind of basis, however flimsy. And then you get to the most focused, and for Dewey, the most valuable kind, what he calls reflective thought. This is the active stuff, deliberate. You pause, you question, you look for evidence, explore alternatives, and you're working towards a conclusion you can actually stand behind.
Okay, so that's the first big point then. Don't mix up just, random mental noise or gut feelings with real reflective thinking. They're different shades, different levels. And this deep dive, it's really about digging into that reflective kind.
And here's the catch. Having that power for reflection, it also means we have a huge capacity for error. Animals working on instinct, they don't make logical blunders. But us, we're freed from that, but it opens the door to getting things really, really wrong.
Wow, yeah, a double-edged sword. Flexibility is great, but it makes us vulnerable.
Exactly, and the source brings up John Locke, writing centuries ago. He stressed how vital careful thought is, because our opinions, even our phantasms, as he called them, they're the hidden drivers behind what most people do. If your basic beliefs are shaky, everything you build on them is shaky too.
Makes sense. And even earlier, Francis Bacon tried to map out these sources of error, right? Back when modern science was just kicking off, he had his famous idols.
Like mental illusions. Yeah, 4 types he identified.
Okay, first were the idols of the tribe.
Yeah.
Error is common too.
Yeah.
All of us, just because we're human.
Pretty much. Like how we tend to latch on to evidence that confirms what we already think, or we see patterns even when things are random. That's built into the human hardware, so to speak.
Got it. Then idols of the marketplace. That sounds like communication.
Exactly. Errors coming from language itself. Words mean different things to different people, or we assume a word perfectly matches reality when it doesn't. Leads to confusion, arguments about definitions.
Okay, and the individual ones. Idols of the caves or den. These are your personal blind spots, your unique background habits.
Your specific biases, yeah. Everyone's got their own little cave that shapes how they see things.
And the last one, idols of the theater. This is more about the culture, the times we live in.
Right. Accepting the prevailing ideas, the fashions of thought, the traditions of your era without really questioning them, like watching a play and just accepting the reality presented on stage.
So errors from inside us and errors from outside, from society and language, Bacon covered a lot of ground there.
And Locke, he had a slightly different take, maybe more practical. He described types of people who often fall into bad thinking habits. You definitely still see these types around.
Oh yeah, like who?
Well, first, there are those who just don't really reason for themselves much. They just take on the beliefs of people they trust, parents, neighbors, leaders, whoever. It's easier than doing the hard work of thinking it through.
Okay, the outsourcing thinkers.
Then you've got people whose minds are basically locked down by one big idea or belief they've already decided on. Everything gets filtered through that lens, contradictory evidence. It just bounces off.
Tunnel vision.
Sort of. And third, Locke mentions people whose thinking is just swamped by strong emotions or self-interest. His examples are great. Try reasoning with someone who loves arguing more than finding truth, or someone whose desires, like for money, just outweigh any logical points against it.
Passion over reason. Yeah, we see that.
So the point from both Bacon and Locke is, yes, we have internal biases, but our social world authority, imitation, language, culture can powerfully reinforce bad thinking habits. Knowing these pitfalls, whether it's Bacon's idols or Locke's types, it's really useful for you, the listener, to reflect on. Which of these might be subtly shaping your own views without you realizing it?
Okay, so knowing the traps is one thing, but what actually gets good thinking started? What's the spark? The source really highlights curiosity.
Curiosity is absolutely vital. It's the initial drive, the thing that feeds the mind with raw material for ideas. You know that old Greek idea, surprise is the mother of science. That's it. A mind that's just passive accepts things. A curious mind gets jolted by the unexpected, by things that don't quite fit.
And it starts really, basically, almost physically. The text talks about it as like overflowing energy, restlessness, like a little kid poking and prodding everything, or even animals exploring, Hobhouse's rats getting into mischief.
Exactly, that initial physical urge to interact, to explore, that's the root. But for it to become intellectual curiosity, it needs direction. It needs to move from just poking at something to wanting to understand why it's like that or how it works.
So curiosity asks the first questions, gets us engaged, and then reflective thought takes over.
Pretty much. Curiosity provides the opening, the initial puzzle piece that grabs our attention. And once curiosity gets us started, how do we handle that information well? Dewey emphasizes that good thinking means looking hard at differences and exceptions, not just spotting similarities.
Right. Paying attention to contrasts. You can see how two things are alike, sure, but understanding why they matter often comes from seeing how they're different.
Precisely. That's why negative cases, things that should fit your theory but don't, are so incredibly important, especially in science. They force you to rethink.
Like that amazing example about Darwin. He knew how easily his mind would just kind of gloss over facts that didn't fit his theories. So he made himself write them down immediately. Any exception, any contradictory fact, jotted down now. Because he knew those were the ones he'd be tempted to forget.
That kind of discipline, that's reflective thinking in action. It's not always comfortable to face challenges to your ideas, but it's absolutely essential if you want to grow intellectually.
And looking at exceptions and contrasts, that's how we start making sense of things, moving from just raw data to actually understanding, getting the meaning.
Yeah, think about William James's description of a baby's world, just a blooming, buzzing confusion. Novelty feels like that to us too sometimes. A foreign language you don't speak, a totally new job, being lost in a strange city.
Yeah.
It's all just a jumble at first.
Right, until you start finding patterns, making distinctions,
Yeah.
getting the meaning. Meaning brings clarity.
It brings clarity, and it also brings stability. Think about concepts like a pound or a foot. Their meaning is stable. That allows us to measure things consistently, compare things reliably, no matter who's doing it or where. Without stable meanings, reasoning would be impossible. We'd still be in that buzzing confusion.
So concepts, these standard meanings, they're like mental tools. They help us, identify, supplement, and place things.
Exactly. Take the example from the source. You see a strange light in the sky. At first, it's just light. But if you apply the concept comet, suddenly things happen.
Okay, first you identify it. Maybe that's a comet.
Then, the concept supplements what you see. You instantly connect it to other things you know about comets' orbits, tails made of ice and rock, even if you can't see those details right now.
And third, it places it. It's not just random light anymore. It fits into the system of astronomy related to planets, stars, the solar system. It has context.
And that placing, that connection to a system is so key. Remember the story about young Darwin finding that tropical shell in a place where only glacial stuff should be?
Yeah, the geologist Sidgwick was shocked, Right? Not just interested, but shocked.
Exactly. Why shock? Because that one little shell in that specific place, it totally contradicted the entire established system of geological knowledge about that region. Sidgwick saw more than a shell. He saw a challenge to the whole framework. And Darwin learned, science isn't just about collecting cool facts. It's about fitting them into a coherent system, understanding the underlying laws.
Okay, so really understanding meaning and actively looking for those things that don't fit the exceptions. That's how we build robust knowledge. It's not just adding facts, it's weaving them together.
And that shift from just noticing facts stick together to understanding the system leads to different ways we draw conclusions. Dewey talks about empirical inference versus scientific inference.
Empirical inference sounds like everyday experience, like the weather example.
Right.
Guy says it'll rain because the sunset was cloudy.
Right. And if you push him, why? The answer is basically, well, it just often happens that way. There's no grasp of the atmospheric principles involved, just a connection noticed over time, following habit.
Okay, so scientific inference needs that deeper understanding, like knowing why the barometer reading connects to rain, understanding atmospheric pressure and humidity and all that.
Precisely. It's about grasping the underlying principle, the causal connection, not just the correlation. Clifford had a neat way to put it. Skill helps you handle the familiar. Scientific influence lets you tackle the new and different because you can apply general principles. You're not just repeating old habits.
Yeah, and Professor James's point about concepts like thinking of heat as motion, once you get that concept, you can apply everything you know about motion to understand heat, even in weird new situations. It connects the unfamiliar to the familiar.
And language, again, is crucial here. Giving something a name, like Emerson said, helps clarify it, makes it something you can grasp and manipulate in your thoughts.
So Locke had that warning, right? Language starts for everyday civil use talking, trading, using it precisely for philosophical thought, for general truths. That takes conscious effort. It doesn't just happen. Okay, so let's bring this into the classroom. How did these ideas about thinking apply to education? The source mentioned observation and recitation.
Yeah, Dewey points out that a lot of the observation done in schools, looking at shapes or apples or leaves or even lab experiments, often falls flat intellectually.
Falls flat. Why?
Because it's disconnected. It's not tied to a real question the student has or a problem they're trying to solve. Jevons made this point strongly. Observation in science is powerful only when it's guided by a hypothesis, by a need to find something out, to define or solve a difficulty. Just piling up observations for their own sake, it doesn't really develop thinking.
So object lessons or nature walks might not be doing much if the kids aren't trying to answer a real question for themselves.
Exactly. And then there's the traditional recitation, the back and forth, where the teacher presents, the student responds. Herbert tried to structure this with his famous 5 steps. Preparation, presentation, comparison, generalization, application, and attempted a universal lesson plan.
Sounds very orderly. Kind of mirrors reflective thought, moving from specifics to general ideas and back.
It does on the surface. But Dewey's critique is sharp. Herbart's method usually starts with the teacher's agenda, not with a student's genuine difficulty or problem.
So it becomes about absorbing information the teacher lays out, rather than the student actively thinking through something they're puzzled by.
Precisely. It can turn into information transfer, not thinking development. And that affects how the teacher operates, too. The old rule was, tell the students the lesson objective right at the start. But for the student, that can kill the curiosity. It removes their need to figure out the problem. It's like giving away the ending of a mystery.
Right. So the teacher needs to walk a fine line, provide enough material to get students thinking, but not so much that there's nothing left for them to think about.
Exactly. Too much presentation blocks thought, as the source says.
Yeah.
The key is giving students the space and the tools to grapple, to ask their own questions, and to work out their own reasoned answers, not just echo back what they were told. So as we kind of pull these threads together from Dewey, the source ends by highlighting the need to balance things that might seem like opposites in thinking.
Like conscious thought versus the unconscious background.
Right. So much of our understanding relies on stuff that's just taken for granted, a shared context we don't even think about. We need that unconscious foundation to even have a conscious conversation.
And also balancing imagination and observation.
Definitely. Just collecting facts without imagination. That fact-mongering, it's dry, it's sterile. Think of Dickens' Gradgrind, all facts. No insight.
But imagination needs something to work with, right? It needs observation.
Absolutely. Imagination needs real material from the world, gathered through careful observation. But observation also needs imagination to suggest possibilities, to see connections, to frame questions that go beyond just what's right in front of your eyes.
So it's a constant interplay. Observe reality, imagine possibilities, test those possibilities against reality.
Yeah.
That's how knowledge grows.
That's the engine of reflective thought, that dynamic balance.
Wow. Okay, so we've really covered some ground. We looked at how thinking isn't just one simple thing. Dewey showed us those different shades. We dug into the ways we mess up Bacon's idols, Locke's types of error-prone people, those internal biases and external pressures. Then we looked at curiosity as the spark, and how meaning comes from examining differences, using concepts, building systems. Contrasted simple association with understanding principles, that scientific inference. And finally, how this all plays out in learning the need for real problems, not just passive observation or recitation.
Yeah, and understanding these components, the drivers, the tools, the common mistakes, it gives you, the listener, a kind of toolkit for examining your own thinking. It helps you maybe spot your own biases, engage better with new information, and just generally strengthen how you reason through things.
So, bottom line, what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Well, it suggests the real aim, maybe of education, maybe of a deep dive like this, isn't just piling up facts. It's about building your ability for good judgment, for that active, reflective thought you can use anywhere, anytime.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you to chew on this week. Drawing from all this, given all these different ways of thinking and all the traps Bacon and Locke warned about, what's one specific conscious step you could take, maybe even today, to push yourself towards more reflective inquiry? Less just accepting things out of habit or desire. Could you maybe channel Darwin for a moment? Actively seek out one idea, one fact that seems to challenge something you believe and really sit with it, really consider it.
Keep thinking about how you think. It's worth the effort.
Definitely. We hope this deep dive gave you some food for thought on that. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep thinking.